Curi perhatian, pencabar lain juga mempersembahkan yang terbaik.
Saya suka stage presence awak.
Kekuatan kamu ada pada feeling.
Mantap, cantik.
Anda mampu mengubahnya dengan dominasi BBNU. Big Stage, siaran langsung Ahad 9 malam di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight. The Penang government plans to downsize the Penang South Islands PSI reclamation project from 3 islands to 1. Chief Minister Chow Kon Yeow said this is a near 50% scaling down of the man-made island project. He said the decision was made at the urging of Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim amid ongoing controversy over the project. The PSI project originally involved the reclamation and development of 3 islands, covering 1,820 hectares, with the main Island A covering 930 hectares. The smaller Island B and Island C of the project, located in the waters of Pematang Damar Laut near Bayan Lepas, have now been scrapped. Last month, Chow announced that Penang had finally received the Environmental Impact Assessment EIA approval for the PSI project, with 71 conditions to be met. The approval was for all 3 islands. Now, only Island A, also known as Silicon Island, will be developed over a 20-year period. The project, estimated to cost around 8.5 billion ringgit, has been opposed by Penang's fishing community and environmental NGOs, who say it will damage the marine ecosystem. While the decision to scale down the PSI project by half is seen as concession to critics, Sahabat Alam Malaysia President Meenakshi Rahman wants the project to be scrapped completely.
The federal government has agreed to fund the transport problems, to address the transport woes through the LRT or whatever. And so federal funding is already available for that. So the initial justification on the need for the funding model of these island reclamation, that no longer exists. The second is that there is alternative land which is available in Seberang Perai, 12,000 hectares, and this comes from the Chief Minister himself, who admitted fairly recently that 12,000 hectares of land is available in Seberang Perai for industrialization. So if we have land for industry, if we have money for the transport issue, addressing the transport issue in Penang, there is absolutely no reason for any island.
At a total cost of 8.5 billion ringgit, Meenakshi argued that it would cost businesses less to invest in available land in Seberang Perai than in the PSI project.
Here you're talking about land being reclaimed. The economic cost of the reclamation needs to be taken into account. So that itself is a huge issue. It's not about just land being available in Penang Island versus land being available in Seberang Perai. My view would be that the land in Seberang Perai would be far cheaper for any investor than and any purchase of land on a reclaimed island, which is going to take about 10-15 years to do. So it just doesn't make any economic sense. And we are now in an economic climate which is not necessarily similar to what was in 2015. And we are talking about a recession, we're talking about a financial crisis and so on, which is impending. So I think the whole economics of this needs to be, it needs to be debunked.
The government will not intervene with chicken breeders and egg producers in negotiating a split in the subsidy given to them. Agriculture and Food Security Minister Datuk Sri Mohamad Sabu said businesses should decide on the division of the 1.28 billion ringgit subsidy allocated for chicken eggs at a rate of 80 cents each. The current rate of subsidy allocates 70 cents to the egg producer and 10 cents to the chicken breeder. According to the ministry, the government had offered the subsidy as a measure to absorb costs and had left the rest of the arrangement for businesses to decide. On Tuesday, Muhammad Sabu said chicken farmers would soon be able to claim their subsidy for chicken eggs once the government's online system was fine-tuned. He said this was for the convenience of farmers to submit their applications online. The ministry in February said the chicken egg subsidy will continue till the end of June. Muhammad Sabu on February 22nd also said the prices of chicken and eggs were expected to be floated after June as part of the government's efforts to overcome food shortage. Malaysia has improved its ranking on the Global Terrorism Index, placing 75th on the latest ranking of the 2022 index, compared to 68th in 2021. Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi says only 2 terror-related arrests were made in 2022, a significant reduction compared to previous years. According to Zahid, Malaysia has made 7 arrests linked to terrorism in 2020 and 126 in 2016. Despite the reduced risk of terrorism in the country, Zahid said authorities would continue to monitor and implement protection measures to ensure the nation's safety, particularly on social media platforms. He said this was crucial to prevent violence stemming from differences in political beliefs, religious bigotry and racism. He added that the Islamic Development Department has been instructed to form a terrorism prevention education curriculum. This would involve all students from preschool, primary and secondary school levels, as well as tertiary education. We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more.
Nikmati jualan membastikkan raya 5G bersama U-Mobile. Percuma peranti 5G Baharu yang gempak dan padankannya dengan pelan U Postpaid. Kini lebih padu dengan 2 kali lebih data 5G dari RM38 sebulan. Pelat Ultra Hotspot 5G untuk berkongsi sehingga 1000 GB tanpa sekatan, had laju ataupun had peranti. Jadikan raya anda Bombastika hari ini. Layari u.com.my.
Bombastika, raya-raya kita gembira.
Anda ingin menjadi seorang pereka cipta? Kami mau membantu merealisasikan impian anda. Kongsikan idea inovatif anda dan sertai program Innovator. Anda berpeluang untuk memenangi hadiah lumayan. Hantarkan video 1 minit idea anda secara online. Tarikh tutup penghantaran telah dilanjutkan atas permintaan ramai. Atau hadirkan diri ke lokasi berikut untuk membentangkan idea anda. Selamat mencuba. Moga berjaya. Inilah peluang untuk menggapai impian anda yang terpendam selama ini.
ASEAN leaders admit that there has been no real progress in implementing the 5-point consensus to resolve the crisis in Myanmar. However, ASEAN Chair Indonesian President Jokowi says that he will continue to engage with all stakeholders to move the dialogue forward.
Kita sudah mengengage yang ada di Myanmar untuk mencari solusi-solusi yang ada. Dan ini dilakukan dengan banyak pihak di Myanmar. Meskipun kita tidak selalu berbicara mengenai itu, tapi sudah kita lakukan. Dan kita akan terus mendorong implementasi dari 5-point consensus. Mendorong terciptanya dialog.
Jokowi also stressed that these engagements do not imply recognition of the Myanmar junta. He called on ASEAN leaders to support Indonesia's efforts to continue the dialogue, which he said was also in line with the 5-point consensus, which mandates ASEAN to reach out to all stakeholders in Myanmar to resolve the crisis.
ASEAN leaders have renewed their commitment to resolving the Myanmar crisis during the 42nd ASEAN Summit. But all eyes are on ASEAN Chair, Indonesian President Jokowi on whether he has what it takes to move the needle and find an amicable solution once and for all. Dr. Jokowi Idris, CEO of Policy and Economic Affairs Center of Malaysia Foundation, shares his thoughts.
Now, if you look into the past history, it was actually Jokowi who managed to initiate a conversation between Russia and Ukraine, who are currently still at war. That kind of commitment has not been taken by any of the ASEAN leaders or even any of the world leaders before. So that reputation still remains in terms of his commitment and his actually intention to bring everyone into the table discussion. He has the cut and has the fit to do it. What more currently, President Jokowi as the chairman, Indonesia as the chairman of our ASEAN, and Indonesia is really highly reputable of all of the ASEAN countries. Not only that, it is also a member of the G20. So I think there are much strength that Indonesia has, not because of the presidencies alone, but I think the strength of a country to move forward of this issue is something that is very, very hopeful.
Is it time for ASEAN to adopt a firm action when dealing with the Myanmar junta? Dr. Jokowi believes that there is plenty of room for dialogue along with a review of the 5-point peace plan to resolve the Myanmar crisis.
By sanctioning and kicking out Myanmar would not even solve the problem. It would just isolate Myanmar into its own arbitrary decisions to do whatever that it wants to its people. And the consequences is still being borne by ASEAN countries. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said Malaysia is receiving 200,000 refugees as a result of this issue. So again, I think isolationism and putting down sanctions would not solve the problems in the long haul. Though we think that the 5-point consensus and dialogue is currently inactive or been halted, I think there must be a new innovative way, having the 5PC as a reference to create more innovative relationships between other countries and Myanmar. And I think this is quite positive in the sense that Laos and Thailand have been actively engaging with Myanmar on a one-to-one basis to ensure that Myanmar, that the room of dialogue is still on and is still on its table. We are quite slow. We are quite very laid back. We have all these kinds of non-interference policy, respecting each other, which puts us not as fast as other regions, but that is actually put our region to be at the safest mode. We do not have any tensions between neighbors, and it involves diplomatic tensions or even military tensions. And I think that is the chemistry that ASEAN wants to protect. And it does not want to change the status quo.
The U.S. is deploying thousands of troops to the U.S.-Mexico border due to a surge in migrant crossings, which is expected to increase once a COVID-19 public health policy comes to an end. Authorities fear it could spur an even heavier migrant influx than the country has already seen in recent weeks. Tens of thousands of migrants have crossed to the United States already this week, while many are still waiting at the border with the hope of entering the country after the Title 42 policy ends. The restriction policy, introduced by former U.S. President Donald Trump when COVID broke out in March 2020, is set to end at 11:59 p.m. Thursday. Under Title 42, many border crossers were rapidly expelled to Mexico without a chance to seek asylum, leading to repeat attempts. The Joe Biden administration has also prepared new restrictions for migrants crossing the border. On Wednesday, the U.S. rolled out a regulation that presumes most migrants are ineligible for asylum if they have traveled through another country without seeking protection elsewhere first, or if they failed to enter the U.S. lawfully. Violators of the new rule could be deported and barred from the U.S. for 5 years. This issue has become a political flashpoint, with Republicans criticizing Biden for rolling back Trump's hardline policies. The number of internally displaced people worldwide has reached a record of 71.1 million in 2022, according to data published today. This 20% increase is due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and climate-related disasters such as the monsoon floods in Pakistan. The Geneva-based Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, IDMC, said nearly three-quarters of the world's displaced people live in 10 countries, including Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine and Sudan. It said the war in Ukraine triggered nearly 70 million displacements last year alone. Overall, conflict and violence led to 28.3 million internal displacements across the globe, a figure 3 times higher than the annual average over the past decade. Most of the 32.6 million people displaced last year was due to disasters such as floods, droughts and landslides. That wraps up Awani Tonight. I'm Cynthia Eng. Thank you for watching and good night.